Hello, Johnny from Eurogamer here, and this is Ghost Recon Breakpoint, the very latest game in the long-running series Thomas Clancy's Ghostly Reconnaissance. I got a couple of hours of hands-on time with it just before the Ubisoft conference here at E3 2019 and left with quite a bit to talk about. If you played Ghost Recon Wildlands when it launched back in 2017, Breakpoint will seem very familiar indeed. We were playing an alpha build which was a little rough around the edges, but even at this early stage in development, Breakpoint manages to recapture the core experience from Wildlands. Running about the place, trying to stealth your way through enemy encounters, and then settling for blowing everything sky high the minute you get detected. As familiar as Breakpoint feels, however, if there's one thing Ubisoft is good at, it's iterating on its existing games, and, sure enough, there's a whole bunch of new stuff in Breakpoint. So, in order to prep you for a brand new adventure in the wilderness, here are 9 new things in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. First up, there's a new big bad. Well, it wouldn't be a Tom Clancy game without scores and scores of ideologically opposed people to shoot, now would it? Your adversaries in Breakpoint are the Wolves, a faction of ghosts gone rogue, led by none other than Mr. Punisher himself, John Berntal, as Cole D. Walker. Being former ghosts, Walker and his troops have had access to the same training as you, they've had access to the same technology, and they are extremely well equipped. It's a bit of a weird one, knowing you're facing off against people from essentially the same organisation as you, reducing your differences to a purely ideological level, but in fairness, the Wolves have seized control of an entire island, the game map, obviously, and they are not going to give it back without a fight. To aid them in their struggle, the Wolves have a bunch of different operatives at their disposal, with some enemy types coming to Ghost Recon for the very first time. In our demo, we encountered drone operators, heavies, snipers, assault guys, rocketeers, drones of varying shapes and sizes, and even mortars. The mortars were a pain in the arse. Now, in terms of the shooting mechanics and the way it handles, very little has changed, but it's in the way you interact with the world that Ghost Recon has changed the most for Breakpoint. For one thing, the terrain poses more of a challenge. Whereas in Wildlands you could basically point yourself straight at your next objective, throw yourself down a mountainside and basically turn up fine in no time at all, in Breakpoint the most direct route is no longer necessarily the quickest one. Try and tackle too steep a slope and you'll find yourself sliding down it. Move around too recklessly and, not to sound like your parents about it, you might hurt yourself. One of the new systems brought in for Breakpoint is the addition of semi-permanent injuries. Take a big chunk of damage in one go and you'll pick up an injury. These can affect your movement speed or your ability to aim properly, and they also cap your maximum health until you deal with them. You take care of them in the field by using a trusty bandage, although the animation quite frankly takes forever and leaves you vulnerable while you're at it. If you prefer, you can soldier on with your injury until you return to the Bivouac. What's the Bivouac, I hear you ask? Good question, it's the next new thing in Breakpoint. The Bivouac is, as the name suggests, a makeshift camp for you and your squad mates. You can heal your injuries, equip and craft items, trade items with other squad members, and you can also prepare for your next encounter by way of activities like eating, hydrating, and stretching. Mechanically, this means you're basically picking a buff for your character, which will then remain active for the next half hour. Buffs include injury resistance and increased stamina. They aren't enormous in scope, but they can still come in handy. You can also change your class at the Bivouac. Classes themselves have also been reworked into something new for Breakpoint. Rather than determining your weapon options, classes effectively give you traits. The Panther, for example, is able to move about more stealthily and gets rewarded for killing people at extremely close quarters. There's also an assault class, a medic, and a sniper. Most importantly though, you can use whatever weapons you like in Breakpoint. While classes will give you a signature ability and a specific special tactical item, all weapons are now available to all players, no matter their class. The classes themselves offer a series of challenges which you complete to rank up, with each one encouraging you to play to the strengths of that particular class. Talking of progression, one of the most significant changes that's come to Ghost Recon for Breakpoint is that progression is now shared across all game modes, so any abilities you unlock in PvE, for example, will be carried over to PvP. The idea is your character is always progressing no matter what game mode you're in, and that's a welcome change, as sometimes the idea of playing PvP in Wildlands could feel like wasted time if you were mainly focusing on advancing your character in PvE. And finally, the last new thing we spotted in Ghost Recon Breakpoint was an absolutely massive deadly drone. Intended to serve as mini-bosses for high-end players, behemoths are brand new robotic enemies that can do an astonishing amount of damage in a very short time, and they're a real challenge to take down. As you can almost certainly tell from my underwhelming capture, my team and I struggled a bit to take down the behemoth we faced. In the end, a combination of EMP grenades, rockets, and hiding like cowards handed us the victory, but it certainly wasn't easy. All in all, actually, moving about the world in Breakpoint can be a dangerous business. Playing at a busy E3 preview event isn't exactly the ideal environment for building strong teamwork, so we definitely weren't moving with all the care or flair we could otherwise have managed, but even so it was actually quite tricky to get about the place without stumbling across one pocket of enemies or another. Breakpoint is definitely the kind of game that benefits from everybody proceeding carefully, and it's not shy about throwing enemies your way if you mess it up. But anyway, that's a rundown of the new stuff in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. As I said earlier, it's a very familiar experience, but I think there's enough new stuff in there to keep series fans interested. But what do you think? Are you intrigued by Breakpoint, or do you think you'll give it a miss? Let us know in the comments. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, there are loads more coming your way over the course of E3, so make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you don't miss anything else from Eurogamer. I'll leave you with a bit more gameplay now, but just before I go, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely day.
Heads up! We have hostiles out here!
carefully.
We're gonna